Hi, I'm Sherry Weinberg. I'm the president of this chapter of PNHP for the state of Washington. And I am sitting in my home on Mercer Island, which once upon a time was the home of two villages of the Snoqualmie tribe of West Coast Indians. The island was not broadly settled, but the whole area was of the Coast Salish tribes. So we are, those of us who are in the Seattle area are on the land that was theirs.
It's really nice that we have so many people here tonight. That shows the high esteem that you guys hold for Dennis and what we're trying to do in these days of hopefully stopping the privatization of Medicare. So we're recording this meeting and it'll be on our YouTube channel, hopefully in a couple of days. And I will be sending out a meeting report in a day or two that'll have the links to the YouTube and just a couple of administrative announcements that we don't have time to get to today. So maybe we will at the end of the meeting. But anyway, I'd like to introduce Andy Wellens, who's the chair of our outreach committee, who's brought a whole new level of dynamism to our chapter, as you will see. Andy was in the Navy for many years and then retired and is in Coast Guard Reserve now. So his healthcare for basically his adult life is, since he was in the Navy, has been through the Navy and now the VA hospital. So he's one of us that is living under the single payer system, so to speak. Andy?
So yeah, thank you. Like David's saying, in my case, because I actually used the VA for the last 15 years, I've watched how it gives people their humanity back, and it gives people their dignity back, regardless of their class in society, which is why I believe so much in single payer. So that said, Dennis Kucinich has honored us with his presence. Dennis was the chair of the Progressive Caucus right after Bernie Sanders, and he was fighting the fight. He was the architect of HR 676, the original single payer bill, as well as pushing to get the public option in. He was at the tip of the spear back in the Obamacare days. And as we all know, the fight is still ongoing. And unfortunately, while we are also pushing for single payer, we have the encroachment of privatization. So, but it's a new year, it's the year 2023. So tonight we'll be talking about strategies to deal with the current Congress that we have, with the makeup that we have, to stop ACA reach and the other attacks on Medicare. So without further ado, welcome, Dennis.
Hi, and I have to tell you, for the physicians from Washington State, when we made a very, I believe, successful run in raising the bar on national health care and really making it a national issue early in my congressional career, the Washington State physicians played a vital role in that, and something that I'll always be grateful for. You know, some of the people I remember include Jerry and Bob Haynes, and I'm sure that some of the people on the call were part of that effort. You know, we're talking 20 years ago now, but HR 676 was the product of input from the physicians community, people who were dedicated to their patients and who felt that this single payer system would be the answer to America's inability to deliver health care as opposed to health insurance to millions of Americans. And so I was proud to have the opportunity to lead in that. And I understand the effort that went into it. And I want to salute you in Washington State for the role that you played in making HR 676, in advancing it to a point where we had, at one point, close to 90 members of Congress supporting it. You know, I want to back up a little bit and just tell you how I came into the healthcare issue kind of indirectly. My experience with monopolies began as mayor of Cleveland in 1977. I was elected as the youngest mayor in any big city in America. And I was elected on a promise to save our municipal utility from a takeover by a utility monopoly. And I've written a book about that. It's called The Division of Light and Power. It was published in 2021. And that book chronicles the tremendous effort that was made by a private utility that now is in 6 states to take over this little utility, because how monopolies exist, of course, is the whole ethic of privatization is to corner a market and have the public pay more for a service that if it was provided through, in this case, municipality, electricity would be at a savings of anywhere from 20 to 25% cheaper for the same electricity. So the battle that I had to try to save a municipal electric system really informed me greatly about the dynamics in healthcare, and that monopolies in healthcare and health insurance in particular have then and now more than ever dominated the scene. I just looked at some numbers from a recent article. Some of you will know this, to show you how the tide has shifted in favor of insurance companies. These are third quarter 2022 payer profits. United Health Group, $5.3 billion, up over 28%. Cigna, $2.8 billion, up over 70%. Elevance Health, $1.6 billion, up over 7%. Humana, $1.2 billion, down 20%. That is somewhat an anomaly. Centene, $738 million, up over 26%. Molina, $230 million, up over 60%. CVS Health took a hit, but it was mainly attributable to a legal settlement. But then you go from the insurance companies to the provider. And listen, this is really, it tells a story. HCA Healthcare, $1.3 billion, down over 50%. Universal Health Services, $182.8 million, down 16%. Tenet Healthcare, $131 million, down over 70%. Encompass Health Corporation, $445.4 million, down over 54%. Community Health Systems, $42 million in losses, down over 137%. So, health economists that said have classified 2022 as one of the worst time for hospitals in decades. In Cleveland, where I'm from, although I'm in LA tonight, we recently had another community hospital close as a result of just not being able to get enough reimbursements. And this is an inner city hospital, and a number of inner city hospitals have closed in the Cleveland area over the last decade as this shift goes and empowers the insurance companies. This was one of the concerns I had when Barack Obama became president, and he brought forth his Affordable Care Act plan. There were 75 Democrats who signed a letter, which I helped circulate, saying that unless there was a public option, which would give states an opportunity to create their own plan, that we would not go along with it. Did you hear what I said about 676? The profits that insurance companies were racking up as compared to, as opposed to providers. HR 676, we all supported, to be able to address the inequities that were inherent in the healthcare system. People just, not only couldn't they afford it, but the medical-related bankruptcies were going through the roof, and the health outcomes in the system were less than optimal, let's say. So that was 676 was the last big run that we made at at a universal type healthcare. So then when President Obama came in, he advocated this Affordable Care Act. I was in 5 different meetings, increasingly small numbers, on this issue of the Affordable Care Act, which the administration was advocating strongly for. And when I looked at it, I saw that the biggest flaw in it is it continued the insurance companies' hold on healthcare. And even worse, it did not have a public option. 75 Democrats signed a letter to the White House saying that unless there was a public option, they would not support the bill. Unfortunately, 74 of them caved under pressure from the White House, and I was standing alone in opposition. And the moment of truth came when it appeared that my vote was a critical, pivotal vote on the issue. I didn't seek for that to happen, but that's the way it turned out. So I had several conversations with President Obama, and there was nothing that was going to move him off of the legislation of take it or leave it. We had a meeting in my district with the president and the people from my district, which was then the 10th Congressional District of Ohio. And the people I represented were concerned about covering pre-existing conditions and their young people in the family up to age 25 being able to be covered. They felt that was major features of the Affordable Care Act that they wanted me to support, even though I really didn't want to. I was telling them, look, this is not a good deal, but I was in a position of saying, okay, to people who are starving for something, that, I can't get the whole loaf, but you can't even have 2 or 3 slices, as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't do that. So I reluctantly voted for the bill, and the bill passed. But the outstanding issues in the system, as far as I'm concerned, were not really addressed for millions of Americans with respect to affordability. The continued privatization of aspects of healthcare have been problematic. We've seen what's happened with managed care. I've talked to so many of my former constituents who have told me about how they have to fight for any kind of help from managed care systems. And now this affordable care organizations, ACO REACH, it really end up being about private equity. It's about the continued financialization of healthcare and our economy, and once again, not about caring for people. And when you consider that the U.S. spends, much more per capita than any other country, and yet it doesn't have better outcomes. When you consider how people just still cannot afford decent care, that they still find that, our life expectancy, I believe is, according to one of the global indices, is now lower than many other nations. We're about 41, 42 in terms of the longevity. We're a country that remains at an ongoing crisis in healthcare, and it's because of privatization, because we haven't been able to break through. So this discussion today, and I want to make it a discussion, not just a one-way presentation, as we look at the terrain with a divided Congress, what's the best path to take? And I want to add one other point here before I go to turn this into a discussion. The last budget that was passed by Congress, about half of it went for the Pentagon. And we have had something going on in our society, which is an increasing militarization of our society. And we cannot, as this continues, all the social needs are going to be in trouble. Right now, Congress is debating what to do about the debt. Well, the debt is over 31 trillion. Now, a good chunk of that comes from wars we should have never prosecuted, never been in. And we haven't learned that lesson. America still believes we're in a unipolar world, and we're going to be the cop and the ruler of the world. It's the craziest way of looking at governance. But the price that Americans will pay is continued cuts in social services, which means that Medicare benefits itself will end up being on the block, as you know, with congressional Republicans in their effort to slash the debt. And you know, we put ourselves in a hole primarily through war. And you know, we should stop digging, but that requires a shift in what this country is about. This whole idea about having guns and butter, or whatever butter means, the idea of feeding people, but also in caring for their social welfare, you can't have it. It's impossible. And yet America keeps going down this path and spending money as if there's no tomorrow on taking the resource and the treasure of our country in order to pursue more wars. And there is a direct relationship to the pressure that exists on social services, mainly healthcare, the economic pressure, the drive to continue privatization, by the way, and the United States addiction to war. So let's, you know, I'm happy to hear your concerns and what you would like to hear. One buzzer shot here that I'm sure all of you are involved in who are practicing or have practiced. One of the things we need to talk about in this country is what can we do to help address help the public lead healthier lives. You could call it health education, but the choices that people make that end up, particularly in the end years, running up the healthcare bills, because we never really have this health consciousness in our culture. It's kind of like the opposite of it, as part of, you know, we're Americans and we'll live the way we want to live. Well, yeah, but, you know, maybe we need education early on to tell people about the consequences of the choices they make. Because and this comes from having a country which doesn't believe that there's an underlying unity in America, and we're all just, you know, discrete individuals, and we don't really have a social compact anymore. Well, we need, you know, physicians are the ones who can help lead the way in changing that consciousness, but boy, do we need a change in health consciousness to make it possible for people to understand why we need a national healthcare approach which involves everyone. So anyhow, thank you for this invitation, and let's have a discussion. We've got plenty of time, and I want to hear what you think, and I'd be happy to share my experience with the system, both as an insider and as somebody who's currently on the outside, but cares very much about what the consequences are of our current inability to be able to meet the healthcare needs of our people. So please.
So before we launch in, Dennis, I know PNHP as an organization, we're very curious to hear what your advice would be, given that, you know, the current House Republicans, it looks like they're ahead by 10 votes. And, you know, you led the Progressive Caucus, you led that fight. And you know, we have a good relationship with a lot of members of Congress. However, we would love to understand, or some good lessons maybe to keep in mind in how we, you know, we're careful not to say whip Congress to get these things done, but how do we coach Congress or whatever? How do we, you know, because it's a lot of people are disillusioned that we're not a representative. We're supposed to be a representative republic, and you know, we have both the current silent privatization of Medicare, which is the ACA reach, which is basically Wall Street just comes in, you know, to eat from the trough. But we also have like the Medicare Advantage thing. But what would be your, as we try to elicit some hope tonight for the year 2023 to deal with this Congress to preserve Medicare, what would be some immediate lessons you would impart on us?
Well,
just to shape the conversation.
First of all, Andy, thanks for making this meeting possible, and the follow-up that you've done to make sure that I'd be available. Thank you. There's some practical things here. First of all, You're from Washington, you work your delegation first. And I mean, really work it. You have a tremendous influence in Washington state. And I think, and you have, one leader of the caucus, Pramila Jayapal, who I think can be very instrumental in talking to other members of Congress. I mean, I'll tell you what we did back then. And it's a request that is a reasonable request to ask Congressman Jayapal to circulate a letter that would, even if it's among Democrats, you may not get any Republican signatures, but to circulate a letter among Democrats standing for, universal health care. And I'm not sure what's going to be introduced in this session of Congress, but to have her introduce the bill again. I mean, period. But to get, it's one thing to have a bill. Here's the sequence. You put a bill in, and then you go around on the floor of the House, and with a letter, people saying, I'm supporting this bill. They'll put their name on the bill. You ask for a co-sponsorship, and it's a little campaign that has to be run member to member, and it's done with the help of staff that sends letters to members, and then you have to work it. It takes a while, but I think she could be instrumental in getting a number of Democrats. You have to keep that alive as an issue, even if it may not go anywhere. It has to stay in the consciousness of people. Critical to do that. So that's number one. But everybody just create a chart among people of the representatives from Washington State, the Democratic representatives, and to talk to each of them and explain to them that we must keep this alive, this hope, and why. And beyond that, and you have to keep a score, see who's with you and who's not. It's the kind of thing you have these are people who represent you, and representative government, particularly members of Congress, they have to pay attention, and you can go in a group. I would say, don't bother going to Washington, D.C. Go to the district offices of the individual members of Congress. Make an appointment. There's a calendar, a congressional calendar, which you can find from the minority whip of the House. And they will have the dates that Congress is in session, and the dates are what's called district work period. Ask to meet with the member during a district work period. I mean, I did this for 16 years. I'd come back home, I had hours at a district. Meet with the member in the office, not a staffer, meet with the member in the office. You don't have to fly to DC. The district offices, district work period. You want an appointment, make the calls this week. Figure out, you have people who probably are representative of every congressional district in Washington State. Get together, organized by district, get to the district appointment and get on their calendar. Because let me tell you, as the year goes, Congress will get busier. Right now, there's some time, and they're still trying to figure out which way they're going to go in terms of organization and what the votes are going to be. Look at the calendar. So, that's the mechanics of it. And the cause of it is, it's make it about Washington State and what about the economy? What about the outcomes, the needs of the people? What kind of experience the people from the state have with Medicare Advantage? Why? And then the next thing is the ACO. That's a national issue as well. And you should ask Congresswoman Jayapal to help on that, to fight back against that, whether it's going to the administration level, or which some of this may be done at, and you've got to watch that, or through a legislative effort that might be made.
That's good advice. I'm about to open up the floor, and I just want to let everybody know. I mean, we have people here from Wisconsin as well, so it's not just the deep blue state of Washington. We have some Minnesotans. Wisconsin obviously is heavily gerrymandered, but they're trying to fight for their Medicare as well. But anyway, so I'm going to open the floor because of the sheer volume of members tonight. We are going to limit it to one question, and to avoid soapboxing, just kind of keep it to about 30 seconds to a minute, because I want everybody to have an opportunity. And keeping in mind, the main discussion tonight is how we're kind of finding hope dealing with this current Congress and how we're going to stop privatization. But if everybody would just raise if you have a question or a comment, just please raise hands. And looks like there's a lot, right?
Hi there. My name is Vicki. Thank you so much for taking my. So you got to talk and meet several times with President Obama regarding healthcare. And originally, when you started out, you had this little group around you, kind of, holding you up, and then they all caved. Just your words, not mine. So, what would it have looked like if they didn't cave? Could you just speak to that just a little bit?
We would have had a public option. Absolutely, 100%. That's what we were holding out for. And that's what it was about. So, look, let's come up with an example of congressional dynamics.
Yeah.
Look at the recent election, Republican speaker. There were changes that happened in the contours of this Congress based on the fact that you had, at one time, a dozen people at least who were holding out. People, we had 75. You could hold things up, but the problem is that, people just didn't want to keep fighting. Sure, we could have had a public option. I don't have any doubt about it. But at the end, when, just to share this with you, President Obama called me. I went, I was in Cleveland, and I actually didn't take the call. I knew who was calling, and because I didn't want to tell him, even though he invited me to come to Cleveland, where I usually drive back and forth, he had me fly with him in Air Force One, and he spent about an hour and 15 minutes trying to tell me why I wanted this. And I was telling him, look, if you don't have a public option, the private insurers are going to clean up here. And he wouldn't make that commitment. So I saw a couple of things. I saw that he had staked everything on it, and I thought it was political inexperience that caused him to do that, but it was also a commitment to Wall Street, who supported his presidency.
Okay.
And in my district, which he appeared at, and I, he and I were there together. After he spoke, people came up to me and they said, Dennis, we don't like this either, but we need to cover our kids who are 25 and under. We need to cover pre-existing conditions. We know it's not that good, but we want this. Now, I acceded to the wishes of the people who Congress, but did I like it? No. And I didn't tell President Obama. He didn't know what I was going to do until I announced it the next day. Mm-hmm. I didn't make any commitment because I didn't like it. And people wondered, well, what did I get for my vote? Not, I got what my constituents wanted. Beyond that, nothing. I mean, the truth is that as a result, this is probably too much information, but as a result of my opposition to the White House on Libya, they made sure that my district was drawn in such a way that the Democrats redistricted me. The Democrats redistricted me out. So they were happy with my vote. This is the way it works. Don't tell me what you do today. Tell me what you, or yesterday, tell me what you're going to do for me today. And we had a severe disagreement over Libya that created a fracture. So that's the backstory. Next question.
Bill.
The question I'd like to ask Dennis, first of all, is what is your understanding of the need to elevate the public health system as the governing and administrative apparatus over the entire delivery system? And I urge everybody to look at ourhealth.pub. It's a crucial imaginative policy model, draft model, to be used everywhere in the country, wherever possible, to incite public motivation and mobilization for involvement. But the question is, our system is obsolete. Our single payer model is obsolete, and yet everybody is clinging to this without understanding we need a massive cultural transformation if we're going to fight for this change. And that transformation means that the public health system has to be at the top of the pyramid, not at the bottom or at the margin. What is your understanding of that?
Well, first of all, you're right. But tell me more about our health.
40 of us worked for a year, 2 hours a week, in order to put together the most imaginative model we could of a true healthcare system. And we built a website. It's called ourhealth.pub. Pub stands for public. It was previously called calcha.org, the California Lifetime Care Health Act, which was individualized planning rather than long-term care institutionalization, ending Medicaid, which is utterly evil. And so that model is on, there's a website, and the website is very, very modularized and complete. And people need to look at it and talk about it and debate the titles one at a time to understand the ideal way in which healthcare needs to be delivered, similar to what's going on, for example, in Cuba.
Okay, let me ask you this. First of all, I haven't seen this, but of course I'm very interested because you raised a point about the current model being outdated. I mean, I was working on this 20 years ago, and I haven't been in Congress for 10 years. So what I'd like to do is this. Is there a model bill included in that? Is there model legislation that you could actually offer that as a structure?
Dennis, look at the model. It's on the web, and then you can call me. I sent my phone number to you for us to discuss, how to work this thing. It's about 30 pages long. The website is very, very rich and very powerful.
Could I ask this then?
Yes.
This could be the purpose of this gathering, and there's always purpose, but this could help to elevate the purpose. If you could circulate that to everyone, then what I'll do, I'll look at it, I'll call you, and then maybe what we can do as a working group is work on drafting a bill.
Terrific.
I mean, that's the way.
David Siegel was the initial drafter of the bill, and he worked with me. I hired him for a year to work with us, and he was the one that crafted 676, from what I understand, right?
Well, we had help from a lot of people, and there were a lot of brilliant cooks on that one.
I'll send the website is www.ourhealth.pub. Okay,
well, I'm going to look at that, and if you have a model bill on it, I'll check that out.
It's all there. It's all there.
I would ask you to invite everyone on this call to look at the model bill, and you may have already done that. Excuse me that I haven't. But this may be that we can create a workshop if there's concurrence.
That would be explosive if we could make it happen.
Well, create a workshop that you come to concurrence on the bill, and then take that bill to the members of Congress and say, this is what we want you to introduce. How about that?
Superb. Thank you.
I'll be happy to work with you in crafting that, because it's not just a legislative language. It's to make it easily understandable so that members would find it something they want to support. So
the preamble is grounded in the Human Rights Bill of the United Nations. When you look at it, you'll see on any criticism you would make, it would be very grateful. 40 of us worked for a whole year to put this goddamn thing together, and it's really good, really good.
Check that, and we're going to work together on it.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. I just wanted to ask you if you think it's worth it to try to do this single payer universal healthcare state by state, or is it just better to focus all our efforts on the national?
All of the above. State by state, yes. I mean, in some ways, you could say that, you know, public healthcare might even be easier to implement at a state level. And once you get it, if you get enough states involved, then it's easier to go national. And that may be what happened, I think, in Canada, where they started in some provinces and eventually.
Saskatchewan. Yeah, it started in Saskatchewan and then domino effect.
Right. Yeah, but I just want to make this clear that you want to advance nationally how those principles might fit in at a state level. But absolutely, there should be work done on a state level. You know, you take a look at cannabis, for example, how that caught on a state level, and that impacted the national attitude. You know, and I think that then you don't have to worry if you can do it at a state level. There's less of a worry if there's a change in administrations or something federally. But I think that, you know, certainly the 10th Amendment gives states that option, and I think whether the government recognized it or not, to facilitate it in Obamacare. Next question.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Dennis. Long been a supporter and admirer of you. So you partially answered my question, which is, if the Democrats ever retain a slim majority in Congress, would you think a good strategy would be what the House Freedom Caucus, the Republican Freedom Caucus did to Kevin McCarthy to get him to support their demands? This was attempted in 2021 with Nancy Pelosi, as you may recall, where if a certain number of the Democrats had a slim majority, and if a certain number of House progressives would have withheld their vote for her as Speaker and demanding that Medicare for all be heard on the House floor, it would have created some fervor and some media coverage, etc. Do you think that would be a good strategy?
Well, you have to, you know, this is why you start to talk to members now and look towards not just this Congress, which is kind of a defensive position, but to the potential of the Democrats gaining enough to take it over, so that you're prepared to advance it and have people take a stand. Because the House Freedom Caucus for the Republicans, they should have taken the Democrats to school on what's possible if you're willing to take a stand. The thing that I'm concerned about, and you know, as a practical matter, and this is not in any way to diminish my affection for Congresswoman Jayapal, who I think has done a very important service in leading the Congressional Progressive Caucus. But when you look at what happened a couple months ago, where members of the Progressive Caucus signed a letter asking for consideration of a peaceful resolution of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And they were slammed down by Democratic leaders. And I mean, they retracted the letter. And today, the Democrats are all about consensus. So to me, consensus is worth something unless you're standing for war. Consensus is worth something if you're standing for the health of our people. So yes, prepare for the next wave, yes. And at the same time, realize that there's some issues out there, such as the ACOs, that require action. But all this is predicated on contacting individual members at their district office, which frankly rarely happens for organizations. Everybody likes to go to Washington, D.C., and then you go there and your members on the floor and are in meetings and are too busy. But thank you for being here, and you could talk to our healthcare staff, or please, this is your elected member and you have a right to have a sit down with him or her, period. And you have to insist on it. I mean, really.
Well, there was pressure put on the Progressive Caucus for doing this with the hashtag Force the Vote action. But people were totally ignored pretty much by AOC, by most of the Progressive Caucus. We pressured, well, I did at least pressured my congressperson, Jaya Paul, and totally ignored. So how would you get around that kind of problem?
Well, look, I'll tell you how it works. You get enough people to come to an office and you know, you look a member in the eye and you say, look, this is what we want. You represent us. And the other thing we need to look at, the kind of dark side of politics, see who is supporting the member of Congress's campaign. This is not a small matter because, you know, money is corrupted to Congress and elections in this country. And the passage of, not the passage, but the court action in Buckley versus Vallejo, Citizens United, corporations are people, sometimes not very good people, but corporations are people. Money equals free speech, all that stuff has enabled both parties to be active in grubbing for money. And as a matter of fact, you may or may not know this, but as soon as members get to Congress, they're handed a book that's like this thick with the names of all the political action committees, and they go to their respective Democratic or Republican headquarters. And most of them, not all, most of them spend a good part of their day dialing for dollars. You know, and so we've got to look at, are you talking to anybody who's overly sympathetic to the for-profit insurance interests because of the money they get? And this kind of thing, if there is, you got to confront them on it. Say, hey, you know, how about us? You know, you represent us. The only way that there can be a breakthrough is through an informed and active citizenry who will, you know, go to the office and present what you want. That's what representative government's all about. And this kind of phony consensus, intra-party consensus, ends up at times being it frustrates the concerns of people who are voting to support that member, because you didn't send somebody to be lockstep with a party. They can help work a party to move the party in a direction, but just to accept the consensus from says who? Who is this? Who's this? And you know, this amorphous anonymous force that somehow dictates this is what Democrats are supposed to do. I don't think so. And you know, members always there's a timidity that needs to be overcome, and sometimes you can talk to the member and, you know, buck them up a little bit. Hey, you know, we need you. You're ours. Go out there and you know, support this legislation. Circulate a letter or send out a dear colleague which outlines why people should support this. You have to create a discussion in Congress, because without any kind of discussion at all, things just fall flat.
Thank you, Mr. Kucinich, for speaking with us tonight. I really appreciate the time with you. And I just want to, just for you, so that you have a little history, I'm a registered nurse here in Washington. I've been working through the pandemic. And I also am part of a grassroots effort to try to pass state level Medicare for All plan through the Ballot Initiative. Anyway, but as for working through this pandemic, it is just surprising to me that even in the aftermath of a global pandemic, our elected officials still refuse to cut their umbilical cord with the for-profit health insurance industry and big pharma. And although I so appreciate everything that Premier Jaya Paul has done, and she is such a fighter, I don't feel that we really have all that strong of a congressional group from Washington. But even if we were to get Congress that would pass Medicare for all, we would have a president who says he would veto it, you know? So I'm kind of interested in not only your thoughts, but everyone else's thoughts about the possibility of passing with a ballot initiative, something that would restrict health insurance companies from using my healthcare dollars to make donations to my elected officials, bribes, whatever you want to call them. And I'm wondering what people might think of that idea.
Well, may I respond? First of all, you can pass anything you want on the ballot. This is a Supreme Court decision. And unless it's overturned in the Supreme Court, it's going nowhere. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have, the Supreme Court does not forbid public financing. Keep that in mind. And that's, that's another discussion. It just says the corporations can play in the process. But, public financing would be a way to balance this. And, it's if you have public financing, the public has a chance. If it's private financing, that's who runs the country. And that's what's going on right now, frankly, unfortunately.
I'm Hugh Foy. I spent my entire career of 40 years in medical education here at the University of Washington and worked up at Harborview. So I can't remember if it was 696 or SB 1200, which was McDermott's bill. But one of them had very detailed plans for the U.S. National Health Service Corps, where students and health professionals could have debt forgiveness by volunteering for a more robust U.S. Public Health Service Corps, a model that is done throughout much of the rest of the world, particularly in developing countries, so-called second world countries. I just ask for you and Bill and anyone involved that just modifying the insurance arrangement is not enough. We need comprehensive health, because one of our big problems, if not just training medical students and residents, but also nurses and other healthcare professionals, is the long pipeline. We train less physicians in our country than any other developed country in the world, but we have siphoned off and robbed developing countries of their healthcare professionals to the tune of 8,000 to 10,000 people a year. That's how many doctors we bring into the US every year, mostly to take residency positions in safety net hospitals in our inner cities. And we've done this for 45 years. So what would be your plan to address the need to educate and train more healthcare professionals in our country as part of comprehensive reform?
Well, you've outlined it essentially, and this is something when we get into a discussion about a model bill, this is certainly a component that should be included. But by the way, I work very closely with Jim McDermott. He was terrific on these things. I mean, he and I work alongside each other on healthcare and peace and a number of things. But this National Health Service debt forgiveness really would do something to encourage people to take some of the burden of wanting to pursue an education in healthcare, and to find, it would be a good, powerful incentive. You raised the question that we're taking healthcare away from other countries. In effect, trained people, and this 8,000 to 10,000 a year that come to the States to practice. Thank you to them, but at the same time, we need to help those who are Americans who are trying to make it. In the previous question, I had a nurse, and I have talked to nurses in hospitals, a tremendous pressure that are under nurses in terms of the amount of time that they're spending in and not able to cover all the patients. The workload has become extraordinary for nurses, and the pressure that's on the whole system, because there's just not enough people to serve the general public. And we need to get more people into healthcare. There's no question about that. But I want to go back to something, and before we take the next question, and that is health education. uh, diet, nutrition. I mean, I studied nutrition when I was at my master's program at Case Western Reserve University. And for my own life, I'm a vegan, and it's made a total difference in my health. It changed my whole world when I changed my diet. I know from my own experience that because I was exposed to this different type of thinking, it made a real difference. I was able to make better choices. And I think that diet nutrition is important. Of course, people have to be able to afford their food. I mean, right now, the federal government's talking about, at least, I believe it's in my own state of Ohio, they've made some decisions of cutting back on the amount of money that would go for food stamps. And of course, we know that, some of the things that are purchased with food stamps in terms of, they may not be the most nutritional products. America has an addiction to junk food. This is definitely part of the healthcare equation, and something that deserves consideration and something that I have a little bit of experience with. Let's go to the next question. Sorry.
I'd like to call on Robbie Stern, who's a leader in the Puget Sound Advocates for Retirement advocacy, who's leading I'd like him to talk about what's going on in the fight against the privatization of Medicare, which PSARA is basically leading across the country, and our chapter of PNHP is also cooperating with PSARA on that. So Robbie, can you describe what's going on?
Sure. But first I have to thank Dennis. Dennis, I don't know, a number of years ago, we hung out together here in Seattle, and you said to me, I'm going to send you this movie, Forks Over Knives, and it's going to change your life. And I'll be damned if it wasn't true. It did. I became a vegetarian, ultimately a vegan. Thank you, Dennis. It's been really good for my life. I appreciate it.
Robbie, I remember you well.
So I just want to let you know that, in fact, Representative Jayapal is going to be introducing 1976 again. And she has 121 co-sponsors. A majority of the caucus is supporting 1976. The one thing that we're hoping we can get her to do in this bill that wasn't in the last bill is have just transition language, so that the workers who would be put out of work in the insurance industry had to just transition to other kinds of work, because we don't want to see those workers just fall into the cracks. But Dennis, we've been working really hard to try and get the Biden administration to terminate ACO REACH. And we worked our congressional delegation really hard. We met with the senators. We met with, Cantwell would meet with us. We met with Murray. We met with a number of our representatives. We were able to get Adam Smith and Pramila to call for the termination of ACO REACH before it started in January 2023. But, Biden administration was committed to that form of privatization of traditional Medicare. And we've made a transition organizationally. One, you should know that we are now working to build a national movement to call for an end to privatization of Medicare. PSARA is being seen as an organization from organizations around the country saying, we really like what you have done in the campaign you're putting forward, and we're working on that. And we have a wonderful partnership with PNHP in Washington, and PNHP nationally has moved on this. We have another coalition, Healthcare is a Human Right Coalition, that was led by David Loud. All of us are working at this point to really do the necessary outside organizing, the organizing of people around the country, so that we can put monumental pressure on the Congress to stop and actually eliminate the privatization of Medicare, so we can have a public, not profitable, not-for-profit Medicare for all system. So we see this as a long campaign. We know that we're having a tall mountain to climb. And I'm sure we're going to look to you for advice as we move it along, but we're moving that campaign campaign forward. So I want you to know we've been doing a lot of what you described we needed to do here in Washington. We've been doing a lot of that, but we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going.
Well, Robbie, thank you. And, you know, I'm in. If there, you know, any way that I can help in that endeavor. And at the same time, I want to pay respect to the fundamental question of the model. How does the model evolve in order to make it relevant? Because there is the exigent circumstances across the land keep changing, and they're not going for the better. And so, because we cannot address our concerns for a healthier America without looking at the choices our government is making with respect to where American tax dollars go. And that's why I don't, you know, for me personally, and this is just, you know, my own view, we cannot continue to pretend that we're the only country in the world worthy of consideration, and this unipolar moment has passed. And this is really about a call for human unity, that we're one people, we're connected, we're interconnected, we're interdependent. And from that, we built a movement. Healthcare is one aspect of that, but peace is the other aspect. Now I have time for, and so Robbie, I'll be in touch with you about that. And then I'll also be talking, was it David who, or Dana who brought up the, William?
Good, thank you. Yeah, Robbie, I really appreciate what you said there. I'm kind of thinking the same thing, and I think that people in this room and Dennis and you know a number of people for a long time in this country have put together great ideas for policies that could deal with this problem. But it's something that troubles me is that you know, in a Pew Research poll in 2020, 88% of Democrats show support for the idea that the government is responsible for providing healthcare to Americans. And a majority of Democrats show support for using a single-payer, universal, comprehensive solution to address that problem. So I think, I guess my question is, in what role does direct action and community outreach and organization play in facilitating this conversation between the American people and our elected leaders, when it seems like that opinion isn't being reflected by policy, and instead the interests of the health insurance industry are taking precedence?
You know, there's a real parallel with the civil rights movement here. You know, we just observed another day honoring Dr. King. And when you look at the trajectory of the civil rights movement and how people were denied social and economic standing and justice on a basis of their color, and how it looked like America would never change, but then all of a sudden it changed. Change didn't start in Washington. Did not start in Washington. Any massive change that happens in the country never starts in Washington. Washington is not just DC is not just the capital of our country. It's the capital of resistance to any kind of change. And that's why your efforts, you know, across the state and, you know, in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and other states that are represented on this call, in coming in, and Robbie, you're talking about this grassroots effort that's ensuing. Critical. That's where it is, because you know it takes that. Healthcare is a civil right. That's it. Period. So. And the figures that you just cited, the 88% Pew study and a majority want single payer. Look, a majority of people in this country are so aware of the deficiencies in the way healthcare is financed, and the pressure remains greater. I have time for one more question, and then I have to go to my next meeting. But I will tell you this, that based on this discussion today, I'll be in touch with you, and then at some point in the not too distant future, once I've had a chance to absorb everything that is happening here and the new model, plus the stuff that Robbie's doing, I think I'll be able to provide some guidance further. And I'm willing to do that because in many ways, my effort on 676 was accelerated with the help of the Washington PNHP. So, you know, I'm very grateful, and I'm still involved. I'm not, you know, I'm not slowing down. So I'm ready to help. So final question.
Yeah, I guess I get the final question.
David?
Bernie Sanders is now the head of the Senate Healthcare Committee. I don't think he's decided whether he's going to reintroduce his bill that probably needs to make some changes in it. Do you think there's any possibility that the Senate Healthcare Committee is going to move us somewhere down the line towards where we need to be with universal health coverage, you know, government funded and guaranteed?
I think we should first try to get a hearing, right? I mean, really.
Right.
I think it would be great for the people on this call, draft a letter, send it to Senator Sanders, and ask for a hearing, and say that you're ready to, you know, whoever's willing to do it would be willing to serve as witnesses. That's how you start it. So let's thank you. It's good to see you in some cases again. You know, I've always appreciated the relationship I had with people in Washington State, but particularly the PNHP. Andy, thank you for setting this up. And this is to be continued. Thank you.
Dennis.
Thank you very much, Representative.
This is a good omen for the new year, and our vision at PNHP for this year is to build a coalition of the best minds for the single payer movement in this year. So you're providing that leadership tonight, and I really appreciate your willingness to keep offering guidance, because we're on we are the forefront. We're the vanguard now, trying to protect what little bit we have as we try to advance single payer. So
Thank you.
From Minnesota.
Hi.
Thank you.
a lot of states tonight, Colorado.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just want to close by, you know, each person on this call has had their own journey to this moment. I want to honor that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if anybody, thank you, Dennis. So if anybody wants to stick around, we had some announcements. Normally we do some housekeeping before the guest, but we're dealing with some time zones tonight and stuff like that. So obviously, if anybody's new tonight to what PNHP does, we have this meeting every month, and we encourage everybody to look into this silent privatization of Medicare called ACA REACH. As of last year, Medicare Advantage, which is basically a conversion of Medicare to insurance company style model, it has 50% of eligible enrollees, and it's attacking the solvency of Medicare. So please, you can go to PNHPWashington.org. We have a lot of great slideshows about this. But other than that, I'll let David take over.
Andy, will the chat go out with the recording?
I believe you can download the chat right now, though, right?
You can download it. You know, I will get it. So I'll pick up any important links there and put them in the meeting report, which I'll send out hopefully by Friday. Another thing is there's a PNHP national webinar coming up on January 26th called Exposing the Profiteers Behind Medicare ACO REACH. And I think there's a link on our website, www.pnhpwashington.org, where there's a link where you can register for that, and that should be a good one. I kind of suspect Ed Weisbart's going to be doing that one. Also, PASARA has one that Ed Weisbart's going to do in a couple of months, and there'll be more information coming out about that. Also, our chapter board is re-elected or elected once a year. So in our February meeting, we'll be re-electing our board members, and all of our 10 board members now have agreed to be re-elected, but there's openings, we got openings for a few more. So if you're interested in joining our board, let us know, or if you think you'd like to nominate somebody else, please do that. We'll send out resumes about the people. So if you're at the next monthly meeting on February 15th, we'll quickly accept everybody, I'm sure.
David, can you tell people what the acronym PSAR stands for, if there's anybody new tonight?
Puget Sound Advocates for Retirement Action. And it's an amazing organization that's got, several hundred people around the state, and they put out, a newsletter every couple of weeks that you should sign up for. And you don't have to be over 65 to join it.
Or do you have to be a physician to join PNHP?
Right. Well, it's an hour and 15 minutes. Some people say that's long enough, but people want to stick around and talk about something else.
Well, I guess we're just, we're brainstorming. We're trying to kill ACA reach as much as possible, or in as many ways. And there's this one strategy, but
PSARA has two committees, one working on Washington State to have, the grassroots put pressure on their members of Congress to come out against ACO reach. There's also, PSARA has a committee that's working on this nationally to make contacts with people in all the other states to put pressure on their particular members of Congress. So I think if that's where a lot of PSARA's energy, and also I think PNHP National is looking at that now as a way to go to end ACO reach, because PNHP National has come out saying stop ACO reach immediately, and sent a letter out yesterday to the PSARA and the CMS people.
well, I asked Kip Sullivan today about Ilhan Omar signing the letter for the IHIP, what's the acronym for the promoting Medicare Advantage? And he said, yeah, it's frustrating. And I said, do you think it's appropriate for a member of the squad to be endorsing Medicare Advantage? And he said, absolutely not, of course. But he said, I don't know. It's like that's one of these weird issues. But hopefully that is one of our priorities. If anybody in the group doesn't know, we're trying to, if anybody's not in Washington State, please talk to your Congress rep to say, do not sign that letter. You want to talk about that at all, David?
That's the American Hospital Association.
No, it's the American Health Insurance
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Association, or
Health
American
insurance
Health-
plans
health insurance plans.
that gets members of Congress to sign on to this letter, which is pro Medicare Advantage, and asking the members of Congress to, increase it, add more money to it and that sort of thing. So last year, I think 320 members of Congress, 80% signed on to that letter. So we're doing a big campaign this year to reach our representatives beforehand so that they will not sign on to this letter. And I think we made some progress there. What do you say, Robbie? You're pretty much behind that.
Well, what I'd say is that we obviously know that Pramilla's not going to sign on. The letter has just started, the letter for 2023, Andy, just started getting circulated this week. So I'm sure that we may see some changes. We're working with Social Security Works nationally to try and pull at least 100 representatives who signed it last year off of the letter. And I'm hoping Ilhan Omar will be one of those. But we've sent requests, as have PNHP Washington, to our delegation, asking them not to sign on to it. We're hoping to find out what is going on in terms of the circulation of that letter now.
Well,
Maybe we'll find out this Friday at the meeting of the Social Security Works Washington Coalition, when we have Alex Lawson from Social Security Works to tell us what the status is. But we know they didn't start circulating it until this week. Now, we have not seen their letter yet because they're not circulating it to our friends. But we're trying to pull as many Congress people off of signing that letter this year as we possibly can. And that's happening again around the country and not just here in Washington. That's just one part of the strategy that we have to do. So we're working on that with Social Security Works. The other thing that we're trying to do, and that we're talking to people about nationally on this, is one, the Ed Weisbart webinar that we're doing on March 20th is a part of a campaign to try and educate as many people as possible about the threat that privatization represents to our Medicare system and to the beneficiaries and to the healthcare of all people who are, because Medicare for all is going to be the vehicle, we hope, an improved and expanded Medicare for all will be the vehicle we hope can become the national healthcare system. But if it's privatized, it's screwed. So we're working on that. We're going to have some resolutions. We're going to get to various organizations to get them to take positions on this. We're going to be doing a lot of educating and a lot of organizing and trying to mount national pressure on particularly the Democratic Party to turn around, frankly, because right now it's the Democrats that are privatizing Medicare. It's the Biden administration that's doing it with ACO REACH.
I just want to pause for 1 second because I want to let people know what your organization is and about your meeting, because we have a guest here from Portland, Oregon, who's asked some Social Security questions. So just briefly, do you want to state the time?
Sure. Well, okay. So I'm with PSARA, Puget Sound Advocates for Retirement Action. PSARA formed a coalition called Social Security Works Washington. And that coalition meets monthly. We meet with folks, Alex Lawson, who is the executive director of Social Security Works in DC. And we try and harmonize our strategies that they're utilizing and we're utilizing to, one, try to stop. We know right now that there's a major threat to the cuts to Social Security, that the debt ceiling is being used to try and achieve a goal that the Republicans have had for a long time. They're also looking at cuts to Medicare. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take on that battle to stop that and stop some Democrats from caving at the same time as we're trying to build a mass movement to call for an end to the privatization of the Medicare system.
And what time's that
That's
meeting?
happening through PSARA, and it's happening through Social Security Works Washington and through Social Security Works in DC, as well as PNHP and other national organizations. And we just got to start coordinating with each other, and we're working on that.
And what time is that meeting this Friday, if anybody wants to go?
It's at 11 a.m.
West Coast time. Yeah. Like I said,
West Coast time, right?
we got some Texas people here tonight too.
Okay.
I'm just promoting for you. I'm getting your organization.
Well, you have the link, Andy. You got the link, so you can send it to them.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill.
Sarah, Robbie?
I just want to say that if people don't know, the danger of this ACO REACH is that people that are on traditional Medicare can secretly be placed into Medicare Advantage and removed from traditional Medicare, and getting back onto traditional Medicare, if they find out about it in time, is very complicated. Second thing I wanted to say is that I woke up last night really troubled. This thing is like the Spanish Civil War. We are really operating like the Republican struggle against fascism, against totalitarianism. And that's what's going on. If the corporate system controls the medical welfare transfer system, they will control the democracy in the most profound way, because 100% of the population will be victimized. Think about that Spanish Civil War, how it turned out. We can't let this struggle end that way. We have to beat the Franquistas. And we have to figure out who,
Catherine?
Yeah, I just, I was gonna post my email in the chat there. And I was hoping, I really am kind of hoping to get some thoughts on my idea. To expand on it a little bit more, it bothers me that my union cannot use any of my union dues to lobby my elected officials. But my health insurance companies can use my healthcare premiums to buy influence with my elected officials. And I'm thinking a simple ballot initiative would be a great way to maybe open the shades on that little problem, and maybe be a way to be, even if it didn't pass, to be expose it a little bit and make it toxic to take those types of donations from those types of people. So I'm really interested in what other people may think about that idea.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, actually, Dr. Weisbart just told me that on Saturday, that we need to make it a liability if you're in league with the health insurance industry. So there's a lot of agreement there. So that's part of like, one of the things I wanted to look at, maybe Dennis can shed light later, but we use a lot of the carrot approach, but I want to start looking at what is the stick approach as well. I think that's part of the stick approach in, I'm going to say it, whipping Congress to do what we need them to do. So, but anyway.
You?
Or maybe like herding cows, or sheep, herding sheep. Get them from all sides.
A lot of people agree with you.
I'm looking for this January 20th meeting that you're all talking about, looking at Social Security Works and looking at Basara. I can't find the link. Can somebody send that out, please?
It's March 20th. It's on our website.
March 20th. Okay.
Well, January 26th is the webinar put together by National PNHP on a similar topic. So
Okay.
that link, the register link, is on our website.
David, I just put the link for the Social Security Works Washington meeting this Friday on the chat.
Okay. Cool. At what time, Robbie?
11 a.m.
All right, good, thanks. This Friday.
And I must say, you should tune into that meeting if you can, because it's the best meeting in the month is the ones that I go to, except for ours, of course.
Something that might be interesting to everybody present. I've recently been trying to research and shed a light on CMMI, the Center for Medicare Innovation. And I looked at their mission, and I've told the board here, and they essentially agree with me that it's CMMI is always going to be generating another version of ACA Reach. And their mission is, the language it said, to stop anti-reform inertia. So, I mean, it's I think that at some point we are going to have to reconcile with dismantling CMMI, because it's government funded, but it's encouraged, all it does is encourage innovation in billing practices. And I said that to Kip Sullivan today, and he agreed with me. He was like, yeah, of course. But I mean, that's obviously very difficult, the thought of dismantling it, because I mean, that was part of Obamacare. Liz Fowler runs it right now. And I don't know if anybody read the article I sent last night, but under Trump, it was Adam Boehler, who basically used his position as head of CMMI to enrich his last company, Landmark Health, through direct contracting entities. So it's, I'm just going to be blunt. It's got to go. We got to talk, or we have to figure out a way to get rid of it. Because it's a joke. And it's funny, the thought of like creating innovation and billing practices for Medicare, such a thing would never exist with defense spending. If they're like, hey, here's we have a new thing, it's going to innovate how we save money for the military. They would never do that. So it's like, why does this thing exist? And I asked Kip Sullivan today, I said, are we going to do better than fee for service? And he said, no. So there you have it. I mean, and we can have a conversation in the future about it, but these are the kind of things on the horizon for us as privatization continues to outflank us, and they're just gaining steam. They're just, as the longer ACA Reach remains, the more money that has flowed into their pockets, the more their lobbyist groups grow. So I just thought I'd share that, though. Like, I was lucky enough to talk to Kip today, and he confirmed a lot of the fears and the concerns I've been having about the Center for Medicare Innovation.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Andy. I mean, that's what MMI was created for, was to innovate ways to save money. And it was put in by the Affordable Care Act. The problem is you have to open the Affordable Care Act to get rid of it. And Congress can do that. But they're hesitant to open the Affordable Care Act, especially with the Republican majority that they have now in there, because who knows what else is going to be stripped of the Affordable Care Act. And that's what they're deathly afraid of. But I agree, that's what has to happen. CMMI has to go.
Yeah, and Kip Sullivan gave me his assessment of the 10 bad actor strategy. I can share it privately, or I can share it in this meeting if anybody wants to know. What would you like, David?
Well, does everybody know what the bad actor strategy is?
Yeah,
The idea, since I wrote the scorching email, so at this point, probably everybody, even including the new people, are aware. So there's a couple of new people tonight, but the ACO REACH is this silent privatization for people who aren't in Medicare Advantage. It was a pilot program that came from this Center for Medicare Innovation, which invites private equity and vulture capitalists to come in and manage care. But and for the new people, it's mathematically impossible to beat the administrative overhead of 4%, 1%, whatever, whichever number you want to go with for Medicare. ACO REACH, which last year on the Trump program, it was called direct contracting entities, but it threatens the solvency of Medicare because it's just expensive. I mean, we're still waiting on the data on that, but a lot of it will most likely, when the data comes out, it will be verifying the same way we've seen Medicare Advantage, because it's overpaid and the fraud and the upcoding and all that other stuff. So the strategy that Pramila Jayapal and Liz Warren came up with was to identify 10 of the members of the direct contracting entities, to call them out for fraud, with the idea that it will create a domino effect, that they'll just implode. But this has been controversial in PNHP, because the counter argument, well, I mean, what Kip said, he's like, if you got like 200, you're going to call out 10 of the 200 that exist. He's worried that it would, I mean, are we going to, like, how much of a dent do we think we'll make? But I was skeptical last month, but there's people in PNHP that I respect who said, let's just hear out this strategy. And honestly, maybe it's a thing where we have to chew gum and walk at the same time. I still stand by, we should demand that ACO REACH be stopped now, which is not hard to do because it's a pilot program. But that's what PNHP is in the midst of hammering out. Is there anything you want to say about that, David? I mean, I hope I didn't steal thunder about next week's meeting, but.
Well, the strategy, yeah, you mentioned it, is if PNHP has done a whole lot of research on calling out the bad actors who have in the past been admitted fraud or convicted of fraud. And, seems like about half of them in the ACO REACH program have this in their past. And so is that a good strategy to don't call for the end of ACO REACH, but just the bad actors, and it's going to fall apart by itself? I think Robbie and Passara took the lead in talking with Pramila to say, don't do that. Call for the end of ACO REACH, because this bad actor strategy is going to allow it to go on. And once it goes on, more and more people will be getting money from it. They'll have more money to lobby our Congress people. So that's a losing strategy. So Pramila was asked to call for an end to it immediately, and she modified her final letter. So I think it basically said, what did it say, Robbie?
Well, she basically took all language out of there that suggested there was anything good about ACO REACH. But after it was clear that it was not going to be terminated, she decided that it made sense to call out the fraudsters that are in it. And, we think that PNHP put a lot of work into coming up with that research that reflected what Rachel Madley put in the letter. Rachel is Pramila's healthcare advisor. And, you know, I personally don't think that the letter did any harm at this point, given when it went out and the way it was written. And, you know, one of the things that Pramila said to us, and she had been working and working and working to try and get other representatives to join her in opposition to ACO REACH. And she just was not able to get any uptake from colleagues, even in the Progressive Caucus. She got them to sign on to the letter opposed to the direct contracting program that Trump put in place. But when she tried then to try and work her own Progressive Caucus to come out and call for Biden to terminate ACO REACH, she could not get uptake. She said there's not the outside pressure to do it. And it wasn't. There was no question about it. It was not a national movement. We were way ahead of everywhere else in the country in terms of taking on ACO REACH. And that's why PNHP did what they did, because they were not able to get any uptake in Congress to call for the termination of ACO REACH. Since then, they've reversed their decision or changed their position, and they're calling for the termination. And there's a movement building around the country to call for the termination of ACO REACH. But we're not going to get there unless we build a movement outside of Congress that puts genuine pressure on Congress. It ain't going to happen.
Right.
So that's what we're faced with, is we got to build that movement. We got to do the educating and build that movement. So that's what we're about doing.
I think that, I mean, personally, one of my goals is to build that public outrage. Because again, I can't tell you how, not frustrating, but I mean, like, nobody knows about ACO REACH. And
I've asked every current and retired physician that for the last 4 months, if they have heard about it, zero, nobody.
yeah, so we need to change that, Robbie. I mean, maybe we can work hand in hand. I tried last year to get independent media to cover it, but it's a new year and I have new avenues. Luckily, Kucinich and I, you know, we have an open dialogue now too, and I'll, you know, I mean, my personal goal is to, you know, this was a great month for us for this tonight, and I want to just reach out to, I want to build a coalition of all the best minds of the single parent movement, because I think it's all hands on deck. You know, I feel like we're like the rebels in Star Wars trying to take on the Death Star right now. You know, it just that's what it's going to take. It's going to take every little effort.
I think this is a main goal of PASARA, and I think your energy and youth could be added to a committee or two, don't you think, Robbie, to help do this? Because this is exactly what PASARA's committee is.
Yeah.
I'm on a couple of committees that are looking at.
But Andy, I think if you go to the PASARA website and you look under ACO REACH, there, in fact, there has been some alternative media that have been running a lot of articles about this now. And well, I was personally interviewed. I forget the name of the guy. Does anyone remember what it was? It's on our website anyway. The interview on ACO REACH that we did. Today we plan for a big Twitter space event on. I have never done Twitter in my life. I want to tell you, I don't tweet, but that's we're working with the disability community, and we're doing a Twitter Spaces thing a week from this Friday, and you know they're expecting hundreds of people to come on to talk about ACO REACH and the privatization of Medicare. So we're making inroads. We're making inroads. I
mean, I'm glad to hear that. I circulate through all the main, like the TYT network and just, you know, Secular Talk, Humanist Report, Rational National, Breaking Points. I always circulate through the headlines. I rarely see this covered to because those channels are really important, because that's the millennial community. That's where they consume their news. More young people watch Secular Talk than CNN. And it's my mission. I really want to, and I'm working on it. But I really, for these shows, I want more shows, you know, I mean, because I'm sure mainstream media is going to ignore this, but we really, we really have to whip that public outrage and scare the shit out of people, to be honest. Because it scares the shit out of me, you know. I mean, I'm like, I don't. By the same token, I think single payer, if we could pass it, I know from what I've witnessed at the VA, where it changes people's lives to have that dignity to see a doctor. I know if we pass single payer, it would cut down on the antisocial behavior in America. I know shootings would go down. I know that people would be a little less stressed, because that's how it impacts my life. But conversely, I look at as if they really kill the social safety net of Medicare and go after Social Security, I see the opposite will happen. Antisocial behavior will increase. I know it. So this feels so existential. That's why I talk the way I do. It feels really existential. Feels very time sensitive. My goal is to really build this coalition in the year 2023, you know, and who knows? I mean, I might be able to, we'll see. I might be able to reach Bernie Sanders possibly too, in some regard. But anyway, there's various projects in the works. I see someone from Texas, Will.
Well, I wanted to piggyback what you were saying about, because I'm in the millennial category. So yeah, we do see Secular Talk, Humanist Reports, there's the Rational National, Breaking Points, I believe, is another one. There's a slew of them. There's also other channels like Bosch, who's a big guy on Twitch. He's a political commentator on there. And there's just a bunch of them. And being able to do outreach, I think the best thing to do is just harass them on Twitter. Just tell them what's going on, show them links and whatnot. And eventually I think they'll pick up the story, but that's my opinion. It's just really just reaching out in Twitter. I don't know if they have other channels. I know there's another one that I know of that I watch. He's a podcaster. He takes suggestions on Discord, and they take suggestions for news all the time, and they cover it. And he has an audience of over 1 million, and hundreds tune into his live show all the time whenever he tunes in. So that's just another outreach that we could try to
agree, Will, right? Like until Secular Talk talks about ACA or Reach, I mean, that would be key, right? Because he has like the way Humanists Report, they beat the drum on like Elon Musk and all these other. But imagine if like Crystal Ball and Sager, well, Sager wouldn't be reliable, but like if Crystal Ball and Breaking Points or, right, because they have their key things they beat the drum about. And then they do this echo chamber. Rational National clearly watches Humanist Report. And then there's this echo chamber. I mean, my goal, what do you think about creating that echo chamber about ACO Reach?
creating an echo chamber. I mean, I think it's a good approach.
How do we
Sure.
do it? What do you think? Just through harassing them on Twitter?
Do you have a good graphic, Andy? Do you have a really powerful cartoon-based graphic?
Yeah, I've thought about doing bed bugs and having DC ACO, like looking up the mattress, because that's what I always say about part of the threat of it is direct contracting entities shouldn't be in Medicare. They're like bed bugs. You got to burn the mattress to get rid of them, which is true.
You've got artists, get your artists to develop a number of graphics to kind of look at how best to use that hammer. The more you can, convert this into something that can be read quickly, visually, the better, the more powerful. And the message is so powerful if you get to the core of it.
Yeah, well, and so another project for our chapter at PNHP is to, because a member keeps bringing up, like when we not even criticize, shine a light on Medicare Advantage as it's hemorrhaging the solvency of Medicare. We're told like we have to be careful how we do that, but that's an ongoing project as well, because allegedly there are people. Oh, here's another thing that Kip Sullivan, I wrote it down, but because there are people in the United States who think they like their $0 premium of Medicare Advantage. And Kip said, well, that's the common way they dupe the poor. Like you trick people into, a cheap car is good until you have to use the brakes. And, he gave me some good little zingers like that. And, that'll be interesting as I learn more about why we're worried. Because I think, David, you said PSAR is also concerned about that for the rich progressives in Seattle that like their Medicare Advantage. I think what we have to get them to realize, though, is that they may like their Medicare Advantage, but it's going to come at a cost. It's so inefficient in how it bleeds the Medicare trust fund.
Well, the thing is, it's cheaper unless you need to use it, and only 20% of people really need to use their healthcare insurance every year. So that
Medical care
80%
insurance.
is flying through with the extra benefits, and traditional Medicare is not allowed to,
Advertise.
even playing field. Congress doesn't allow traditional Medicare to offer several of the things that it allows Medicare Advantage to do. So we're trying to even the playing field. So that's another goal.
I sent Robbie a phone number for Richard Wolf, who has a podcast is seen by 300,000 people. And he would be so wonderful to kind of recruit and would be so glad to participate, I can assure you. And if Robbie can contact him and to see how you want to weave him in and to maybe use his show in order to have a half an hour presentation on his show for his massive audience. Richard Wolf wrote the book Understanding Socialism, Understanding Marxism, and a number of books on healthcare corruption. He's in
Bill, where did you send me that phone number?
I sent it. I put it in the chat, Robbie. I put it in the chat. I'll read you his phone number right now. It's 646-336-8443. It's a very dear friend, and he's really top of the line.
Well, I've heard him on Tom Hartman.
He has a show called Democracy at Work. That's a regular show that's a half an hour long, at least once a week. That's just outstanding. No rhetoric,
Right.
just brilliant, power, and he's a revolutionary thinker. One of the few really serious academic revolutionary thinkers and speakers.
Maybe we'll have Andy and Will take care of the millennial population. Kind of our analysis is that we're going to have a hard time, getting through the other stuff that many millennials are concerned about. And by the way, I love the millennial population. I think they're fantastic, but I think that they're not a lot thinking about at this point Medicare and Social Security. So we really are targeting people that are 50 and older, because we think those are people that are thinking about Medicare for their future and Social Security.
They're
They
the
may not
first
be there,
victims.
but they're thinking about it.
They're the first victims, for sure.
But Andy, I want to say to you, you guys know a whole buttload about ways to reach the millennial population that, frankly, I have no idea about. Like I said, I'm going on this Twitter Spaces, and I'm like, well, I sure hope I don't get killed in the process. So I mean, I think that you guys have a knowledge about the alternative media that millennial generation is listening to and looking to, and anything we can do to provide you with resources and material so that you can do it effectively, that would be an incredible contribution to this fight. Incredible.
Well, let me bring it back to Will, the millennial from Texas.
Yep.
So share with the group, Will, about why. I mean, we're millennials. Clearly, Medicare for All is extremely popular with millennials.
It is.
What's your insight on how we whip up the out? Like, first of all, would you agree that millennials would share my dread about Medicare being privatized?
They have parents. They have goddamn parents and elders in their lives, and they're beginning to see the problem.
Yeah. Well, I want to take it from the millennial from Tech. Let's tell us, Will.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, it's just like whatchamacallit, like it's like a subchapter of the main issue at hand. So, I think it's definitely good to tackle it. It's definitely good to at least try to do outreach, even make memes and stuff like that out of it. Because even though it's not something that's going to affect them immediately, I mean, elder millennials, I'm on the older side of millennials, but they're approaching their early 40s, so they're getting to that point surely but slowly, and they know how crappy the healthcare system is. So, and I the ones that are coming into prominence in terms of the younger voting bloc are actually the Zoomers, So those are the ones that were born not the late 90s, but the early 2000s. So, but yeah, so I think millennials are, as they're getting older, they're starting to realize like, yeah, this is something we gotta really look at, because, especially if Wall Street's coming in, they're siphoning off funds from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. They're going to be like, it still encompasses the whole thing of like, they're stealing from us, these fat cats, top 0.1% or whatever. So
How are they going to protect their parents and their grandparents? Jesus, just remind people that they're part of families.
Well, here's the thing, that's true, but there's an element, a deeper element to drive here, that this is their future as well. I think, because Will, you can speak to that, right? Like, there's a reason millennials love Bernie Sanders and they love Medicare for all. It mystified the Democratic establishment and CNN. Like, why do millennials love Bernie Sanders, who's 80 now or something? But Will, you can attest to that, right? It's the millennials identify though with Medicare, like they would like something, or go ahead. They like to expand the social safety net. Yeah,
well, the main issue is like, yeah, we want healthcare to be free to the point of service. That's the main issue, but the other issue under that, it's like, well, as the system is now, as much as we want Medicare for all, that's not what we have now. What we have now is going to go away. We don't do something about it to protect it now. And yes, it is something about the grandparents, something about the parents that you could also hit on. I agree with those points as well. But you could also attack it of like, well, until we have Medicare for all, which is, it seems to be like a long climb up to get, we got to protect what we have, and what we have is going away. And if you get to that point where, well, all we have is just Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, that's going to go away. You're not going to have that unless we start fighting for it now. And so we find ways to like develop a coalition and start fighting for that. So yeah.
So Ronnie, you haven't said anything. Ronnie's the president of Healthcare for All Washington.
I was just going to, just following this, the recent comments. I think that, Robbie, you're being a little bit too modest, because PSARA and a lot of other organizations too have put out some very useful tools that can be shared. Andy, have you ever watched the video on Scrap the Cap?
No, I'd like to watch it. What is it about?
It's about scrapping the cap on Social Security and taxes, and having people, pay their fair share. And it's a quick, short, direct message to really aimed at younger people, to bring them into that issue about how to solve some of the Social Security issues. And it's not just PSARA, but some of the older groups have these videos or these recent memes or programs. Oregon had a great one, cartoon video that they did about declaring healthcare as a human right, or affordable, accessible healthcare as a human right, that just passed in the Oregon election back in November. There seems to me that there are a lot of things out there that we could be sharing through this media. So I would encourage people with that skill to get things out there to look at some of the short and sweet things we've done over the years.
Sounds good. Yeah. Is this on YouTube, or where would you watch this?
YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a rap video.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. I'll have to check it out. I listen to a lot of hip hop. So, but old school hip hop.
It's old school.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Did anybody see Democracy Now! This morning, the thing on medical debt?
No.
It's really good. And I used that on my 28-year-old son. And I said, okay, so you're going bare and not insured. You break your leg, you're screwed. You listen to these guys, you'll never get a loan for anything because you will lose your credit rating. And I said, you better get on that website. I said, you decided to take a leave of absence and hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Well, you better go on that website now because you might qualify for, you know, a semi-indigent ACA plan. He writes me back. He says, I qualify for five different plans. Can you help me sort this out? So this issue affects them too. My other son fell and broke his hand, and he was a carpenter with no benefits. I mean, he was out for a year. So, and it cost him and he didn't get it. He decided not to get it fixed, but to just get it casted. He couldn't work as a carpenter for a year.
Well, so exactly. I mean, this is why Otto von Bismarck in old, he's one of the original social medic, you know, like their version of Germany's, I forget what that system's called, but he wasn't like a socialist. He's just like, I want a healthy, robust society. And it's like, we lose that product, like your story. I mean, society, it's a net positive to get single payer passed, you know, like this productivity lost if people can't go see the doctor.
But I also agree with Bill and others that single payer is just the first step. Our system, we don't have a system. Our arrangement is so dysfunctional.
Barbarous.
It's phenomenal. I mean, just like my wife, I put in the chat, she went to get a cardiology appointment. They said, sure, in 3 months. I mean, are you kidding me? It's crazy. And just parenthetically, if you look at big organizations controlling what we have, 17% of Washington residents profess to be Catholics, but over 40% of our hospitals are now controlled by Catholic organizations. So we are losing ground so fast. It is amazing. So I think there are ways we can have wedge issues that we can push to younger people because they are so fed up and apathetic. They've just thrown their hands up until it lands in their lap. And by the time it does, it's too late.
Well, I mean, I mean, speaking part of that generation, though, I think a lot of it is just people don't have the information. I mean, I talk to Medicare age people, they don't understand. I understand Medicare better than they do with Part A and Part B and Medicare Advantage. You have to be a wonk, unfortunately, to understand these things. So, I mean, our mission partially is to get the information, to educate the public on our highly convoluted healthcare system.
One of my good friends is the chair of surgery at UC Davis. She said, I'd retire, but I can't figure out Medicare. And she's one of the smartest people I know. She says, I'd retire you, but I can't figure out all this Medicare junk. I mean, it's amazing.
Looks like, Margaret, you have something to add?
Yeah. When I talk to people, I use this phrase. You've been paying premiums since you were 17 years old, and you have to wait till you're 65 to get the benefit. That's a fact.
Yeah, who's making money on that deal, eh?
If you live that long.
Right.
Well,
and
it's like a gym membership.
I mean, my wife and I, we pay $1,700 out of pocket every year for our free Medicare. Now we got a top shelf supplement, but we pay $1,700 a month
for your
Medicare.
That's your Medigap?
Yeah, right. It's Medicare. We both pay Medicare out of our Social Security, and we're at the top of the list because I was a surgeon, right? And made it a very good living. But then we got to pay for our through our Public Employees Benefits Board, the state of Washington. Our supplement plan is $980 a month.
And millions have nothing. We have coverage, but millions have nothing. And we don't get those stories. Those stories are absolutely wrenching.
Well, you pay taxes to provide subsidized insurance for the lawmakers. You pay taxes to provide subsidized Medicare for people who don't pay taxes.
Right.
And
Well,
so why should you not get Medicare as the taxpayer?
well, here's food for thought for the group that I've thought about. Maybe one way to, when we all know, again, and I'm being redundant for the new people tonight, but we all know that Medicare Advantage is heavily hemorrhaging the solvency. But maybe one way to stop Medicare Advantage is if we could get Congress to fill that 20% in Medicare Part B, because for those who don't know, Medicare, when it was passed by LBJ in 1965, it was called the three-layer cake. Part A, I believe you're completely covered for it, but Part B, it was a compromise with pressure from the insurance industry and the AMA and the hospitals, and they gave that damn compromise where they would leave out 20% of Medicare Part B with no cap, which has forced people to be vulnerable to having to get this what's called Medigap insurance.
Yep.
So imagine if maybe one mission we do to add to the docket is we try to maybe instead, I mean, before we get Medicare for all, maybe we say, hey, let's complete that 20%. Then maybe people would have less of a pardon?
Dental vision. We're
That
talking in
too.
circles.
That too,
Yeah.
but that's a separate. I mean, this is ridiculous that we have to like split hairs, you know, about like drugs and Medicare Part D, but food for thought. Maybe a goal is we push completing the Medicare Part B. We get that going. you know?
That's Andy, that's in Pramilla's bill.
Oh,
There's
that's
elimination of it. I mean, it's there. And
okay.
it's, so, I mean, and it also includes dental and vision. There was a question on the chat, does ACO REACH have upcoding like Medicare Advantage? And I don't know who asked the question, but we haven't had enough experience with ACO REACH to know, but I bet you we can predict that there's going to be upcoding because it's a capitated payment thing and they get more money, the more risk that's associated with an individual beneficiary. I guess what I want to say is this has been an interesting discussion. Thank you. I'm pretty old and I got to go to bed soon. So I'm gonna say goodnight, but I do want to say that I really do hope that the millennials who are here really do take on the task of at least trying to educate millennials on the issue. I know I live with millennials at this point, and I know lots of millennials just because of the life that I lead. And, you know, they've got a whole lot of other stuff going on. They're raising kids, Andy, like you are. They're working full time. They're, you know, they're trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do about the climate crisis and what it means for their families. I mean, they got a lot of crap happening in their lives. Very sympathetic to the work we're doing. Understand that it's in their interest in the long run. But in terms of being activists at this point around this issue, they've got a lot of other luggage that they have to bear and they have to carry. And I'm very sympathetic to that. But what I do want to say is that we'll continue to do the educating. And if you all know ways, alternative media to use to get to millennials to see this as something that requires their activism, you know, that'd be great. That would be wonderful. But I'm going to bid you all a nighty night and thank you very much for what's been a really interesting program and a discussion afterwards. Thank you.
This is our longest one in years.
Great, well, yeah.
I think.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we got.
Right.
After hours.
I think we're all ready to fall over, except maybe the millennials.